Welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, William Liu, and joining me for the first segment is a friend of the program, Savannah Hamilton. Sav, how you doing?
Hey, well, I'm good. How are you?
Are you still in Sacramento, or are you already down in San Francisco?
We are already in San Francisco.
You guys weren't staying overnight in Sacramento? You guys were good on that?
Well, yeah, we were good. We bussed down late last night after the game, and it was good vibes in the bus, let's just say that.
Yeah. You know what, actually, independently, Sav, I actually heard something about that, and no, it's good to hear because, you know, I think they deserve it. That was a really good performance. It was a really good win. To me, watching at home, I had to, like, really contain my excitement because, you know, it was, like, midnight when this game was taking place.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't, you know, be as enthusiastic, you know, as I usually am in the 600 level, Sav. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep, of course.
You know, not quite the same when my partner's trying to sleep and go to work in the morning.
Fair enough.
But a really great performance, though. Raptors winning last night by a score of 113-95. I want to start with the defense because Sacramento had literally been the most, you know, they just scored the most points in the league. They averaged 120 points per game. And before last night, they had only had one game where they were held under 100 points, which was once against New York, where they lost, where New York held them to 99. Toronto goes into their building, hold them to 95, forces 19 turnovers out of them. I mean, Savannah, like, is that the Raptors' best defensive performance of the season?
I think the stats speak for themselves. And, yeah, because they didn't just do that against any team. They did it against one of the best offenses, the number one offense at home in the entire league. And when you see performances like those, you know, you can't help but wonder or say, where was this all season?
I know.
So, of course, yeah, it definitely was one of their best defensive performances overall. And, yeah, like, I mean, if you want to get to the nitty-gritty of things, like, you know, you saw so much defensive effort and collective effort against Sabonis and then De'Aaron Fox, and just the way they limited them by double teaming. Well, actually, they double teamed De'Aaron. They definitely double teamed Sabonis, but they double teamed De'Aaron a lot too to make that entry pass very hard to Sabonis, which I'd love to get into as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts, Will, too, because I mean, I was beside you last night, so.
Yeah, no, typically I would have been going wild for that performance. Honestly, it was really good because, you know, when we were down at shoot around on Tuesday before you guys flew out, shout out to you and your 6 bags, by the way. You know, you were definitely well prepared for this long road trip. But, you know, we were down at practice and there was a whole thing where Thad was talking about, okay, we just went through this, you know, film session and we got to get back to our identity defensively. And literally everything that he talked about, which I guess Nick Nurse didn't really want it to be out there, but honestly, who cares, right? I'm happy to hear that they're working their defense. But everything Thad described, which we went through on the show yesterday with CJ Miles, about being in your gaps, you know, the high walls, people rotating for each other, all that kind of stuff. It was all present last night, and it really shows you the potential of what the Raptors can do defensively. Because again, like I know it's just Sacramento, so it doesn't sound as impressive as like, ooh, we just went in and shut out like the Milwaukee Bucks or shut out the Boston Celtics or anything like that, but the Raptors were so good defensively, and especially against Fox, who is such a good transition threat, and then also Sabonis, who's such a good half-court threat. The fact that Sabonis, he coughed up a career-high 9 turnovers from the Raptors last night. And look, the Raptors didn't have a natural center to guard him. A lot of it was OG, but also at the same time, a lot of it was great help from Fred, from Pascal. And that's my big takeaway, is just looking at the Raptors helping each other, playing together as a team. You can be very good defensively individually, but the best defenses are the ones that help each other. It feels like there's a 6th man on the court. And, yeah, I mean, again, I guess my question is, like, where was this all season? But, yeah, Sav, I mean, that defense in person, I mean, it felt like Sacramento couldn't even get any room to breathe, you know?
No, it was swarming. Like, and this is the vision. Like, I think last night was almost like the taste test of what Masai and Bobby put together and what they wanted to see all season. It was that swarming defense, that physical defense, because, you know, Sabonis, like, let's be honest, he got bullied in the post. And it's really hard to bully an all-star, and especially as big as, like, he's like a 7-footer, right? So, or almost at least, I'm pretty sure. But, yeah, anyway, so he he's a very physical guy himself, but yet last night they kind of made him look like kind of like he was a first year player all of a sudden all of a sudden again. And like, Scotty did it by moving him off the post, like just by getting physical, getting into his back a little bit, but like obviously without fouling. And then it's almost like the Raptors were just taking turns on him. Like Scotty would be playing off of him, and then boom, OG's on him now, and then OG be playing off of him, and then Chris Boucher added this amazing spark off the bench, and he's like blocking shots right at the rim and stuff like that. So you got to give the Raptors credit because they never caught a break. Like they had some 3-point opportunities, and we saw Herter hit a few. But if Herter is like one of your lead scorers on that team, you are in great shape. Because the main thing, of course, was Sabonis, because he really is the engine on that team. I think De'Aaron Fox is really amazing, and Sabonis, if you look at his numbers, he's not averaging like 20, 30 points a game, but he's averaging like enough points. But he's kind of like a distributor. He's kind of like the anchor on their offense and defensive side. And so if you rattle him, you kind of rattle the whole thing. And it's funny because I was thinking about, back when Sabonis was in Indiana, he really struggled against the Raptors too. I think the Raptors just have his number. Like there's something about Sabonis and the Raptors that don't quite mix. And Sabonis talked to me before the game, and he was very aware of what the Raptors can bring. Right. He told me, he's like, I understand that like their record isn't the best right now, but it's going to be a dogfight. And given the tone in the Sacramento locker room, it seemed like a lot of the other guys were a bit more relaxed. But here is like Sabonis like putting up an intense sweat in shoot around, and then coming in immediately into the locker room like pretty much like meaning business. Like he knew what was coming, despite the fact that the Raptors record is what it is. But I was also thinking about this, Will, like you kind of brought up a good point. Yes, no, like this isn't against the Milwaukee Bucks or the Bostons, and like not even like a Memphis Grizzlies. But at the same time, like the way that the Sacramento Kings have been playing, like they are right up there. And I think we don't give them enough credit. And it's almost like if we don't give the Sacramento Kings enough credit for how far they've come as an organization, then we're almost discrediting our own performance against them, because this is a top team that, would you be surprised if they make it to, a second round, maybe even a Western Conference Finals? Maybe I'd be surprised if it was a Western Conference Finals, but a second round appearance, not at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, listen, I was pretty impressed with them just watching them last night, even though obviously essentially the Raptors were in so many gaps and stuff like that. They were just like disconnecting their offense. Even still, though, they had really quick ball movement. A lot of guys were really empowered to attack and score, right? Keegan Murray is a rookie just coming in there and, taking contested threes and confidently stepping into those, or like driving against OG on a closeout and getting all the way to the rim and finishing with the left over Pascal. There's like, these guys are obviously Kevin Herter with the headband. He doesn't need that headband, but that's okay. He got the headband on. Okay. And he's knocking down shots, and they're just like, it's tough to play that team. I mean, last night, even despite the Raptors playing great defensively, they still shot 48% from the field, 41% from three, and 92% from the free throw line. Like, that's a team that really is able to just execute. Now, you got to give Mike Brown a ton of credit. I think he's probably going to be one of those leading candidates when you hear about Coach of the Year this season. But yeah, that's a really good team. And I think that, of course, as you mentioned, it's really about disconnecting the play from Domantas Sabonis on both ends of the floor. The Raptors were able to get at him defensively, which is not a surprise. We've seen that over the years. But also, just cutting him off offensively. Like, yes, he had 9 turnovers in last night's game. I'm just looking through some of the recent performances against Toronto. He's had a 5-turnover game against Toronto earlier this year as well. So in the 2 meetings against Sacramento, they forced him into 14 turnovers just by himself. Last season, they had a game where they forced Sabonis into 6 turnovers. Another game previous to that, they had 6 turnovers out of him. So they really have done a great job of sort of like, they have a good game plan against them, I think is what I'm trying to say. But then again, I just think that togetherness, that willingness to help each other on defense, we've just been missing that for so much of the season. And I don't know, like, if that's the impression that you got from talking to the players, before and after the game, but like, was this all just that magical practice where they showed them the video and all that kind of stuff? Like, because that focus was noticeably different from start to finish than most other games this season, if not all of them.
It was definitely the practice. No,
I mean, I don't know. It'd be nice if it was, Nick's like, hey, you guys, well, it turns out we actually can play defense. Let's just do all this that I'm
I
showing you.
think I think Thad should talk to the media more often.
I agree. Best interview on the team.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, he really is.
Yeah.
No, he's great, and he always has such a great basketball mind. And I think that kind of with everything, with all the rumors and the trade stuff, like it's such a nice break to talk about like how the Raptors are doing on the court and being successful. And yes, to answer your question, like such a different demeanor on the team. Just starting from that practice, exactly what you pointed out. Like I went to shoot around before the game, and like everybody, I can just tell everybody was really locked in. Not to say that they hadn't been like that in previous shoot-arounds, but there's just almost like an extra layer of like focus that I was feeling from them. Like I know OG, I spoke to him before the game, and he was like, "Nah, I'm ready. I'm ready."
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, and don't forget, like he was coming off of that like right ankle like soreness injury, and then I talked to Gary, and I asked Gary like in the scrum, kind of like, hey, like how do you face this team? And he's like, yeah, like he kind of gives me the same answer, like stick to our principles, da da da. And then off camera, I asked him, okay, no, for real though, how do you chase this team off the line without your defense collapsing? And then he was like, well, we're about to walk through some stuff and shoot around. We're going to make sure that we're focused and locked in on this because we definitely this is the team that we want to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. So there's a little extra pride, I think, in this one because I think they probably knew the expectation wasn't super high for the Raptors against the Kings just because the way everything's been. And they lost to the Kings previously, but only by like a bucket earlier in the season. Yep. And yeah, like credit to Mike Brown, as you also said, like, he took some of that Golden State Warriors offense. And that's actually something that I talked to Precious about after the game. I believe it was Precious, or was it Fred? I think it was Precious. I talked to him about after the game. I said, like, you guys just faced a team that kind of stole the playbook a little bit from Golden State Warriors, given the fact that the coach coached there. Now you guys are going into the Golden State Warriors next. How hard is it to duplicate this effort? How hard is it to match this? And he's like, okay, well, if we could do it once, we could do it again.
Right.
Like, right. And this is like the launching pad, and Precious really talked into the team identity piece as well. He's like, I said, how long do you think it will take until you truly get back to that Raptors defensive identity? And he's like, well, performances like this certainly help, and this is a great launching pad, and I don't think it'll be taking long at all. So there's definitely like a positive tone. Don't get me wrong, they're not celebrating. Like they're not like, whoa, we just won the championship. No, but they are. I could tell that there's a lot of pride in this win. And in previous wins, I don't think they were as sweet as this one. So this one is a good one.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. And it's weird to say this against Sacramento, but they're truly playing really well this season. Obviously, Precious has been a big part of that sort of defensive, turnaround. His ability defensively is huge. But, and I wanted to get into his bench performance as well. But I also think that, look, at the bottom line is you need your leaders from top down to be bought in defensively, right? They need to sort of set the tone more than almost anybody else because people are going to be looking to them. If your leaders are taking plays off, sets the tone for the rest of the team to sort of take that play off as well. And I just thought that in that third quarter, Pascal Siakam was so good on both ends of the floor. Yes, he scored 14 points. Yes, he was going at guys and one-on-one and mid-range and all that stuff was working. He didn't even get to the free throw line last night because they weren't blowing the whistle, but he was still scoring, all that kind of stuff. But defensively, there was a stretch there where the game was tied 82-62. And for 4 straight possessions, Pascal Siakam rotated over at the basket and got a stop. He got a block, he got a steal, he got 2 shot contests, vertical, no foul against Sabonis right at the basket against a bigger player, stopped him each time. And the Raptors literally came down every time and missed a wide open 3, so they couldn't extend the lead. But it just showed to me Pascal has that next level defensively that he can get to, and that maybe this year at times, because of the offensive load, he's not able to get into it or not access it all the time. But he had that high level. And then Fred as well. 4 steals, 2 blocks. To me, they were all 6 steals. I mean, Fred doesn't, jump up and meet anybody at the rim and block them or anything, but, he was excellent defensively yesterday too, forcing a lot of turnovers. So it starts with the top guys, and then everyone else follows. I mean, to be honest, everyone else brings that energy on a consistent basis anyway, but it was great to see that from the leaders in particular. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy that you touched on Fred because, like, Fred was, like, the unsung hero on defense that, I don't think we've quite seen this level of, like, this level of defensive performance from Fred that we have, like, that we could come to expect. I mean, we saw a lot of it last season, and I think this season, it's not just like Fred is not necessarily like your one-on-one defender, right?
No.
He's a guy that does so well in systems. Like, he could be such a pest when the whole system, defensive system, is working really well, like 5 guys on a string. And what he did last night was the example of it, because what would happen is he was on De'Aaron a few times, and De'Aaron was trying to get the inbound pass to, the entry pass to Sabonis, and the moment that pass was in the air, 2 guys would be on Sabonis. So Sabonis would be guarded by OG, and the next, Scotty's rotating or Pascal's rotating over.
Right.
And then the moment that Sabonis put the ball by his waist level, or dare he take a dribble to gather himself to go up, that ball was stripped from him, and that was from Fred. That's how Fred got his steals. And so, yeah, you pointed it out. That set the tone, because I think the bench sees what the starters were doing, and we're like, yo, we can't come in here and just drop that level of energy. Like, if that's working, if that's successful, then we got to figure out how to maintain that. And that's exactly what the bench did, and credit to them, because that hasn't always been the case all season. And so, yeah, I think that yesterday, was just the best example probably all season. Like you said, it's the best defense, yes, but I think it was the best team performance. It was the best level of trust level on defense of the help side rotation, knowing that it's coming. Yeah. And I hope that they're able to take this and use this as hey, this is the example of what works. Let's do it again. But yeah, Precious absolutely made that impact. Chris Boucher, yeah. It was actually a toss-up between Pascal and Chris Boucher of who's going to get that walk-off interview.
Really?
Okay. Yep. It was, because Boucher just came in with such a spark, especially in the first half.
Right, 2 blocks right at the rim right away. Exactly. And you're like, oh, I know that's what, that Nick Nurse is not going to bench Chris after he sees that. You know what I mean?
No,
not after that. Yeah.
You can, and also the fact that he had 16 points as well.
Yep.
So
super aggressive.
Yeah, he hit 2 threes. He kind of extended the lead there. He was a huge factor in why they kind of got that gap going. And then Pascal and the starters maintained it. They went on a 22-7 run in the third quarter. Right. And we all know that the third quarter has been the weak spot for the Raptors all season. And so when the starters came out really strong, building off of what the bench did at the end of the second quarter, coming just before half, it all kind of just flowed. And you saw a maintained Raptors. And like I said, man, you want to see this type of performance time after game after game after game, because this is the vision that Bobby and Masai had originally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And look, it's a shame that this is game 49 of the season, and we're talking about finally they show us. But you know what? Fine. As long as you do show us eventually, right? And of course, this is that make or break road trip. And we've said this about the last homestand as well. This is the make or break homestand. I mean, look, listen. I think management understands the long view, and they see the talent here, and it's really just about how to augment it, how to make sure that Mix is ready to make it to the next level. Obviously, they're behind schedule this year. It's very, very far behind schedule, and we'll definitely talk more about trades in the second half here. But, yeah, I thought this was a great performance, and it's great to see it from the bench. Really happy for Chris. Great documentary out, too, if you haven't checked that out as well. So, we know what Chris can do on both ends of the floor. Precious starting to really open some eyes for me, man. Precious 9 of 12 from the field. There were games last year Precious would go 3 of 12 from the field on these exact same looks. And whether that was him rushing the shot or him not making the right passes or him forcing a shot here or there, there are always going to be a select couple of moments where Precious becomes a little over aggressive. But I've loved the approach that he's taken since coming back. And yeah, 9 of 12 yesterday. Such great patience finishing around the basket. What did you see from Precious? Because to me right now, he is clearly the Raptors' best bench player.
Yeah, it's funny. So Precious, a while ago, he was talking about his favorite books that he's been reading while he was injured.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was asking him, in the locker room, kind of following up on that. I'm like, okay, out of all those books, which one is your favorite? And he said, Chop Wood, Carry Water, How to Fall in Love with the Process of Becoming Great. And out of curiosity, being the journalist that I am, I decided to go get the book. And I started reading it.
All right.
And, oh, my goodness, the amount of, Timbit's knowledge and, mindset training that book pretty much has in it into approaching the everyday mundane tasks in your best effort, I can see why he's kind of playing at the same level. If he's taken anything away from that book, then it makes sense that it's kind of translating to the court now, because I think he's taking pride in all the little things. And whether that's like kind of like coming into practice an extra hour earlier, making the extra defensive effort. He also told me like on the court that he's been watching and observing OG a lot. He says that like he feels like they have kind of like a similar like athleticism level, and they have they both have natural gifts. And he said he just wants to build on that. And he said that, hey, OG is such a strategic player that I would love to kind of pick his mind and continue with that. So, and so he's been really watching OG's defense closely. And I think that's exactly like the combination of, in that injury, in the 24 games that he was injured, him getting his mental game right. And, we're seeing the pressures that we saw at the end of last year, kind of playing a lot more freely, kind of playing, and like using his athleticism to his advantage on both sides of the ball and not forcing anything. Like you still see the odd possession, but like it's a lot more natural. Like you see him making good instinctual reads, right? Like if he's open on a 3-point shot, he's not hesitating. He's going to take it. Sometimes if he sees a guy that's going to close out really hard on him, he's already kicking it to the rim. He's driving it immediately to the rim. So he's kind of like developed a lot more confidence. I would say, you know what the word is? It's assertiveness. He's developed a level of assertiveness now, and I think he kind of was trying to find that earlier in the season, and I think after post-injury, he's like, no, let's get back to my game and focus on what was working. It's kind of funny because Stride kind of said the same thing to me a couple games ago, where he's like, I'm just going to focus on my game and let the chips fall where they may, basically. And funny enough is that it's working.
Yeah.
They're both playing pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, I think the only unfortunate thing in the last, 2 weeks here is some of those narrow losses, right? That Minnesota game where you were all ready to, do that walk-off interview, and then the Raptors do that. All right, so no interview. All right, that Boston game, they were leading for huge parts of it, and they don't win that game, or that Milwaukee game when they're leading. And it's just like some of those performances are just like so gut-wrenching, because they had played well, and finally we see them play well for the full 48, and finally got a walk-off interview, with Pascal, who, obviously, look, he's always been great this whole season. I don't think there's any debate really whether he's going to make the All-Star team or not, just on his own merit. Like, you look at what he did last night, 26, 11, and 7, I think, and it's just like, yeah, okay, regular, and it's like also the defense as well, a true two-way player. And I like the answer that he gave you. We just got to stick together. And I think that's when you hear enough of these Pascal interviews, because you're doing them every day like you do hear that consistent message from him. He doesn't blame anybody. He doesn't talk about anything about how, like, this guy's not doing well, or this guy's not doing well. He's just like, we have to be together as a group. Doesn't matter if the bench lets us down one night. They're just going to do better next time, And I think there is something about that positivity that is really, I don't know if it's holding the team together, but at the same time, I do like to hear that from the leader.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's great leadership to never really throw anybody under the bus. Like, and I give credit to the, the Raptors as a whole in this whole season. Like, it's so easy to be like, well, if this player just did this, then maybe we wouldn't be doing this. Like, nobody has said that. Like, they've all got, like, even when Scotty was not playing well at the beginning of the season, nobody was being like, Scotty got to play better. Like, nobody said that. Like, on the team, his own teammates didn't say that. Everybody's like, oh, he's learning, he's young, he's growing, let's leave him, give him time. And now we're starting to see Scotty kind of come into his own a little bit now. I think like we're starting to see what Scotty exactly is. And he's that guy that can give you 20 depending on a matchup. He's a very matched up based type player. But yeah, so like you said, like going back to what Pascal said and sticking together, I think is great messaging. And you're right, he's probably been the most consistent player. Like I could almost tell you before I even like ask Pascal a question what the answer is going to be. We just got to win. We just got to win. Got to stick together. We got to win. Yeah. That's like two things he says.
Well, I love it though. I think you really do need that positivity to sort of hold through some of these tough times. Last thing, Savannah, real quickly before we go. Didn't even touch on Scotty, but I found it really impressive seeing him play entirely two different roles. First with the starters, more of a connector, more of short rolling, making the next pass, did a really great job setting up some corner threes in the first quarter. And then second quarter, I thought was his best quarter. So good at running the show, finding Chris at the basket, some kick out passes as well. getting his own bucket when it was late shot clock. Yeah, I mean, just your impressions watching Scotty in that first half, because I thought for me, in the player of the first half was Scotty Barnes for the Raptors at least.
Yeah, I mean, like Scotty is such an interesting game because his game can be very quiet, but people don't realize whether his game's quiet or loud, it's effective.
Mm.
So like, and I love the fact that you did point out that Scotty was probably like the player of the first half. I think I'm sticking with Chris Boucher in the player of the first half.
Fair.
However, Chris Boucher would not be able to do what he did if it wasn't for Scotty. So you make a fair case there. And Scotty, you're right. He was a playmaker. He was finding his teammates, but he had 6 assists in the first half, and I got to talk to him. I think I did a hit last night about the pride he takes in passing and finding his teammates. Scotty's actually a very unselfish player. And considering his level of stardom so young, that's a rare quality to have in a guy. So, right. I remember talking to him previously, just after the Knicks win that we in Madison Square Garden, and he was telling me that he loves the no look passes, that it's been a focal point for him growing up, and then and that he just loves getting his teammates open, whether it's a no look pass or a tough screen. That's something that he really takes pride in. Right. I think that's something that we saw in the first half, because when you have a player like that doesn't have the ego to necessarily be I need to get mine. He's going to find his teammates, and that's just the recipe of a successful team. That's just having that guy that can find his guys, but is also a scoring threat. You absolutely cannot take the break off of Scotty and just let him facilitate all the time. You have to make sure that you're up in his space, because the moment you give him a little bit of space or anything, he's going to take advantage of it. He's just going to go straight to the rim and turn on that light switch. And when you turn it on, it's really hard to turn it off with him, because he will just continue to attack. But you're right. He just found his teammates in the best pockets and the best spots on the floor for each and every one of them. And it just goes to show you just his decision making on the court and why he can truly be a bit more of a point forward type. And he's that versatile guy for sure.
Yeah. All right, Savannah, appreciate your time. Enjoy the Bay. I don't know how much time you got there. I suppose just really the rest of today, but yeah, no,
pretty much.
It's truly so beautiful, though. Go out in nature. The city itself is just whatever, but
grass.
Yeah, you got to go see the sea lions and stuff. They're in the wharf. You got to go to the bridge. Obviously, you got to see the big trees. It's really one of a kind place. I don't know if you've been to the Bay before, but it's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will go to practice and then spend the rest of my day outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're already down at I forget where, Market Square or something like that, downtown in
something
San
like
Francisco.
that.
Yeah. All right, Savannah. Take care. Appreciate you. All right. 1 of 7 down. All right. You still got 6 more of these to go.
For real. All right, here we go. Right. Take care, Will.
All right. Appreciate you. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. I've been your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. When we come back, we'll be joined by ESPN NBA insider Bobby Marks. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu. Thanks to Savannah Hamilton for joining us in the first segment and for the second segment. As promised, Bobby Marks from ESPN, former NBA executive. Bobby, appreciate your time. I was actually just thinking about this because I was thinking about sort of how Masai and Bobby will approach, this very, very busy, crucial time of the year. And I was thinking about it too. And I was like, well, Bobby, you probably dealt with Masai around this time in years past. And I was thinking about when would that have happened? And of course, it was one of Masai's signature deals, right? Carmelo Anthony. Now that one ultimately went to the Knicks, but I know the Nets were involved in that. So I wanted to start here. What was it like dealing with Masai?
It's funny. I dealt with when Masai got the Denver job and Billy King had gotten the Nets job, and I remember being at Disney World and with my kids who are now in high school, and Billy King texted me. He's like, "Hey, there's this guy in Denver named Masai Ujiri. I've never spoken to him. Can you get his phone number for me? Because I want to call him about Carmelo Anthony." So that was talk about a long. God, thank God that social media, how it is nowadays, wasn't back then, because that was, that was what started in September and it ended in February, him being traded to the Knicks. And but that was, I primarily dealt with Pete D'Alessandro, who was Masai's number 2 guy during everything there. But that was a long and winded process with that. It certainly worked out for the Nuggets. And then with Bobby, Bobby was in the league office for a long time, and he was my point of contact whenever we had to make, we were doing trades. Like I would call Bobby and be like, "Hey, like, does this just double check and does it work?" And then when we did trade calls, he was on there with us. So I've known both guys for a long time. Too high level, and it's a critical point. I don't know if it's deja vu like 2021, like Kyle and Norm. I think this is a lot better roster. Certainly last night, like, you watch the Sacramento game, you're like, hey, everything's good in the world, right?
I know.
And then you get some games and you're like, oh, man, like, we got to move Gary, or I don't know if I can pay Fred and stuff. So that's hard. It's just not an easy decision here, because it's so much different than the offseason. As you know, when you're not basing it off you're just basing it off, like, how do we think this roster will look going into training camp? Where here, you're basing it off like the remaining 30 games. And if we make a big trade, do we still have enough to get in, or what type of direction are we willing to go? So not easy decisions. That's why they pay these guys a lot of money to make them. And we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Bobby, I mean, just speaking to last night's game, you think a really great road trip can change your mind, like, 2 weeks before the deadline, or no?
Well, I just think it's a matter of what the desire here, as far as, I think, Gary's interesting because he's got both guys are interesting because he's got a player option in his contract. And, I think the cost for him will be maybe similar, maybe a little bit north of where his salary is. And, based on Fred coming up and then Pascal eventually, and then OG, then Scotty, are you comfortable paying, basically 5 guys, north of $20 million. I mean, that's probably the reality of things. I mean, you don't have to do anything and maybe deal with it, deal with both players in the off season, whether it be signing trades or, like, it's not like just because you think you might lose him, you have to do something here. And I mean, how the East is bundled up. I mean, I think you really have to go on a pretty good run to get into that top 6, right? I mean, like, but I think you can get into that 7-8 range. And if you have a good Western Conference road trip, but hey, they might lose the remaining 6 games here, and we might be saying, like, I think it might be time to do something. But that's the beauty of the trade deadline. Once it passes, this is kind of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think from a management perspective, like, at this time of year, are players just coming up to you all the time and being like, "Hey, I heard this. Am I getting traded?" I'm like, "I heard this. Am I getting traded?" Or all of those stuff. Does that come to management, or does that go to the agents?
Well, I mean, I think we had traded Brook Lopez about 6 times when I was in New Jersey and Brooklyn. I mean, there's 6 different times, and then you get to the point, and you didn't want to go down to practice and watch because you're just sitting there and they're like staring at you, right? I mean, like, it's an uncomfortable feeling. It really is. I mean, it's not a good feeling, and then you're on the plane with them, and they I think nowadays it's a little bit more challenging just because of we could hear Fred's name in a rumor, and maybe there's no intent as far as, them doing anything with him. Maybe the goal is to bring him back on a long-term contract and stuff. So it's a different, it's a little bit of a different world than it was, 5 or 6 years ago here. But yeah, I mean, I think as long as you're honest with players, I mean, I think if you're honest with players, it's a good thing that if your name's being mentioned, because that means somebody wants you here. But I think there is a little bit of a sense of relief once 5:01 passes on February 9th.
Yeah. I think, okay, so in terms of the Raptors themselves right now, you definitely hear about them all the time. They're probably the most mentioned team. And I think a lot of reports are that sort of the Raptors are, I don't know if they're holding up the trade market or if they're sort of like the team that has potentially the most to sort of potentially sell or liquidate here, 2 weeks before the deadline. But, my thinking is just like, I want to ask you two things. Number one, like, which player on the Raptors would get you the biggest return mid-season?
OG.
Okay, why?
If that's what you wanted to do. I mean, I think the OG situation is contingent on one thing. I think it's contingent on some changes in this upcoming next CBA. I think if the league changes the extension rules where you allow, instead of a 20% increase, and you are allowed to extend that player based on the percentage of the salary cap. So for a guy like, let's say, OG this upcoming offseason, let's say 30%, right? Mm-hmm. I think he would garner the biggest haul because a team knows that they don't have to wait until the offseason of 2024 to sign him as a free agent, and they can extend him. They can extend him for a large number, and that could be the same for Toronto. I mean, Toronto could be the same thing where they say, you know what, the extension rules are going to change. I'm not doing anything with him. I think we can sign him to a long-term contract this offseason and not basically be restricted here. But I think big wings are enticing. I know being in Brooklyn and New Jersey, we'd sit around in our conference room figuring out how to get a 6'8", 6'9" guy who can defend, make shots. I know he struggled a little bit before this trip started. On those 5 games, but I think he would probably go, I'll take Scotty out of the equation here. I'm not talking about Scotty either, but I think OG would. I mean, certainly, I think then you're probably looking at Pascal. I think my concern with Fred is yes, he's got the player option here. The likelihood is that he's going to be a free agent. My concern is long term, I guess. I'm concerned about the wear and tear a little bit, the minutes played. Yeah. I mean, you've seen it firsthand. Still a high-level player, but I think we get into sometimes a little bit of a predicament when we're rewarding players kind of what they've done in the past, with extensions and not what the future holds. And I think he'll be really good, high-level probably for the next few years. But what does years 3 and 4 look like, or is it something that you just deal with then when the cap goes up here? So I think that probably Fred and Gary. I think if you're looking for a guy and you're not comfortable paying, and if he's a rental for the remaining 3 or 4 months here, like a team like New Orleans, right? If I'm the Pelicans, I'd be calling Toronto and say, hey, I'll give you we've got a bunch of, one good draft pick, and we've got salary to make a deal. And if Gary Trent Jr. can win you a playoff game, something they don't have off that bench, then that's probably what I'm looking for right now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because there are certain pieces, right? Obviously, Pascal is the most accomplished out of this group, and he's definitely the best player on the team at the moment. But it's hard midseason to trade for a player like that, right? Because you have to fit so much around them. Yeah. That's more of a move where you make in the offseason where you have a plan in place and you can build a team and make moves with that in mind. With OG and Gary, I think in particular, they seem like very flexible pieces that you can plug in. And I do wonder, in a case of a guy like OG, does a contender look at it like we have, no matter what, if the CBA changes and the extension rules changes, we can get him for long term. But if we trade for him right now, we can get him for 2 playoff runs. A guy who's an elite 3-and-D guy who just did a great job against Sabonis yesterday, even though he's, OG's a small forward, Sabonis is the center.
Yeah.
A guy who can switch like that has to that might also, I guess, be slightly more enticing, mid-season as compared to a star.
No, that's a great statement. I mean, you're right. I mean, mid-season trades are hard. I mean, we went and acquired Darren Williams from Utah in 2011, but we were a lottery team, right? Like, it wasn't like we were a 50-win team and Darren was coming in here to kind of get us from a first-round team to a conference finals. Like, that wasn't like we were just like, all right, the next 20 games is kind of an audition and see what we need to put around him next year here. And
Right.
I think for OG's standpoint, I think you could just basically throw him out there. I think Gary, you can throw him either start or have him come off the bench for 25, 30 minutes, where Pascal, where like he's going to be either your best or your second best player. And then it's trying to figure out like the other pieces around. And that is awfully hard to do when, in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now, I think from the Raptors' perspective, I think, there has been a case made, and it's not like that hard of a case to make, that maybe they take a temporary step back this season and they sort of, tank. Or even if they want to go more dramatic and say, this is a great time to capitalize, we're going to move a couple of our veterans away and just go completely young and maybe lean into a tank. That makes sense on paper, especially in theory. But I do wonder, in the Raptors' particular situation, do you think it'd be a tough sell to management if you were Masai and you're going to Larry Tannenbaum and you're saying, hey, Larry, I know you trust me here, but I think our best move here is to sort of move off of these guys right now and go into a tank for 2-3 years? Because I was thinking about it, like, look, the Raptors were at the very peak in 2019 when they won the title, right? Got so much excitement. 2020, Kawhi leaves, but they're still a really good team. You're still charging great prices. The building is packed. You're going to make the playoffs. You're going to be the 1 seed. Now, of course, they don't actually get any of that revenue because they had to play all of that in the bubble. The next season, they're not even here in Toronto. You get literally $0 from it. In fact, they probably lost money having to play in Tampa. And then the following season, last season, even though they returned to Toronto, it was 50% capacity sometimes. It was 80% capacity. Then it was 0% capacity for a month. So I do feel like maybe you lost a lot of money, and it's probably a little bit financially more difficult of a sell to management if they wanted to pivot in that direction. What do you make of that idea?
I don't think you have to go full rip down, tear down the house and knock it down to the foundation.
Okay.
Like, I think doing that is extreme, and then trying to build it up is extremely hard. Even Houston's been digging out post-Harden for a long time here, but that's a little bit different management. That's probably a little bit of a different direction. I do think what Utah has done, I guess Indiana to an extent, that you can, I guess, kind of pivot and just kind of go in that middle area, but not being on that, I guess, that treadmill of mediocrity and have no path, right? I think you could pivot and still have a foundation, whether it be like, let's say, you know what, we're going to keep Scotty and we're going to keep Pascal, and then we're going to move off the 3 other players, and we're going to get a boatload of picks for OG, and we're going to get some other things here, right? Or maybe get some rotational players, and we're going to have a ton of cap flexibility or finance, whatever going forward here, and we're still going to be, we're not going to be a top 5 team, but we're going to have the infrastructure to one day get there, where right now we don't think we can. I think that's probably more of a direction than basically having a fire sale and then, tearing it completely down, because going the fire sale road, I'm probably more concerned they've won too many games to basically get into the victor sweepstakes or scoot, or, who knows, maybe if they're 7th or 8th going into the lottery, that you can probably jump up there. But, and that's hard. I think Oklahoma City probably would have loved to have been in the victor sweepstakes here, but they've won 23 games. And I think they've shown that, and they're different than Houston because they've got an all-star in Shea, right? They've drafted well with Giddey and Jalen Williams and Lou Dort, who's an undrafted player here. So I think that's probably a little bit more of the model, I guess. Maybe you take a step back for a year, but you're not in the bottom for 3 or 4 years.
Right. And look, that's kind of what happened when the Raptors were in Tampa. But, I was thinking about that too, but it was like, well, it was easier to do when it was in Tampa, when there was literally no fans in the building. You're not even in the same city remotely. And there's a pandemic going on. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that sort of really factored into that one. It might be a bit of a tougher thing right now, at least for me on paper. But, I think, if maybe it's just a Sacramento win talking, I've never been so excited to beat Sacramento in my life. I was so thrilled last night at 1 a.m. But yeah, Bobby,
well, you got production off your bench, with Chris.
Oh yeah,
and and Precious, right? Like, and I know that I tease those guys when I always put out like, hey, bench scoring tonight is 32-5. Like, it's like,
that's not even teasing. That's just reading the numbers.
No,
sometimes.
I think what happens is that eventually, like, the starters will run out of gas here, right? Like, eventually, like, it's not sustainable. It's sustainable over 16 games if you had a football type schedule, right?
Yeah.
It's sustainable, but when you're doing it this way and you're playing back to backs or every other night, it's hard to do. And when you get some relief, whether it be, those two players or, nights when your bench is giving you more than just 7 points total, it helps.
Mm-hmm.
And it refreshes kind of, some of these guys when they come back into the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing too. Like from like a front office perspective, when you have a team like the Raptors who were without some pieces due to injuries. Now, I'm not saying at all that the Raptors' issues this season are just injuries. It's beyond that. But like when you do have a lot of absences from the lineup, like how do you remain patient? You know what I mean? Because that invariably is a big factor in terms of why they're not performing well.
Oh, especially when you're kind of limited what resources to go out and sign players. So you go out and you sign Otto for most of your mid-level exception, right?
Yeah, that didn't work out.
And he's hurt.
Yeah,
and he's hurt. I mean, that's where teams kind of the guy when you didn't have you drafted Christian in the second round, you didn't have a first round pick because you traded it for Thaddeus here, and so you're limited as far as and then Precious is hurt, Otto is hurt. Chris was hurt earlier in the year, so you're a little bit more restricted here, where you're looking down at your bench and you've got basically two guys on two-way contracts and a couple of players who are undrafted. It puts a lot of pressure on Nick. The part of you says, you know what, just play these guys and let's see what you have. But from a coach's standpoint, you're saying, like, you know what, I got to put my best five out there, even if I'm playing them 38, 48 minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's where sometimes, you do feel like, okay, obviously management brings in all these players, but sometimes the coach can only trust certain guys who have shown them something before. I'm sure obviously that's sort of a daily give and take sometimes between front office and coaching. This win over Sacramento, like I said, super excited. Is there any chance that the Raptors, surprise us all and actually add at the deadline or at least pivot? Because you do hear things like, okay, the Raptors continue to be interested in Jakob Poeltl. He's the one that got away for Toronto, apparently. They want him back. And, there's this idea that maybe we use Gary to sort of move him. To me, that just seems like you're really taking from a position of weakness already in terms of the Raptors shooting and adding at defense.
Another big.
Yeah, adding another big. But at the same time, I mean, do you think San Antonio will really get two first-round picks for Poeltl, or is this sort of more posturing?
That's hard. That's a little rich. I mean, that's a little. I think a first.
One is fine. One is fine. One's fair.
Yeah, I think for Toronto's sake, it's probably a protected first. Pearl, I think, is more of probably a play for long term, right? I think that's probably what you're looking at more as far as the goal is to trade for him and then re-sign him, just because of where you are financially. You won't be able to go out and get him as a free agent based on the salaries here. Same way you did, similar to what they did with Thaddeus as far as trading for him and then having his bird rights to kind of bring him back. But yeah, I think that's probably more of a, if you're going to not trade off some of your players. If you're going to pivot, that's probably more of a you're basically kind of looking at one position and moving one of your better guards or one of your few guards here for something that can help maybe long term.
Yeah, and listen, that's not an easy thing to do because Jakob is going to get signed to a bigger deal in the offseason as well. So you got to be ready to pay, and of course, the Raptors already have a lot of guys that they're needing to pay this summer too. So, you don't want to necessarily add to that. Last thing before I go, Bobby, I just, especially thinking about San Antonio and Jakob Poeltl, is there something to the idea that like certain front offices just have really good relationships with other front offices? Because Raptors have obviously made 2 deals now with San Antonio and potentially a third if they get Jakob. Is that a thing?
There is a comfort level of dealing, everybody's got relationships. And look at the Wizards and the Lakers, right?
The Lakers have 4 guys from the Wizards back in the 2020 roster,
Well, and two of the second round picks that the Wizards got back were part of the Westbrook trade from 2021. So, I think there's more of a comfort level as far as, I think the goal when you go into this is that for everyone to kind of, make out as far as, being a positive deal for both sides here. You're not trying to, outsmart somebody. I think it's, when you have a comfort level that you're going to get a fair offer, there's a comfort level that maybe it doesn't get out to the public. Maybe there's a tendency for some front offices for things to be out there more. So, Utah and Cleveland, Cleveland's a good example. Those guys they've made a ton of trades over the lot. Certainly the Mitchell trade. But there is a relationship business here when when you look at Toronto and San Antonio, certainly from Kawhi to in the past, Thaddeus certainly here, that you can get a deal done. And there's not usually what happens is that there's such a process where, hey, this is what our front office will do. This is what you'll do. And then you got to take it to the next step, whether it be ownership and then your finance people. And sometimes it drags forever. And
right.
I think if you know that that it's going to be a go, I think that's a little bit more of a sense of peace.
Fair enough. All right, Bobby, thank you for your time. Appreciate you. I know you're very busy at this time of year, so thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Have a good day.
All right. That's Bobby Marks of ESPN. Catch him on the Low Post. He's excellent with Zach Lowe in particular. But we've run out of time today. I've been your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the program. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to producer J.R. Manatad, our board producer Derek Bandale, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping with the YouTube stream. And I'll be back to wrap up the week tomorrow.